Welcome back to the deep dive. We are picking up right where we left off.
We are. Last time we were swimming in that chemical bath, right?
The chemical bath, exactly.
Yeah.
That huge surge of hormones in the womb that, well, it basically sets the stage for whether a fetus develops as male or female.
Right. We talked about how the default setting for humanity is female, and it takes that very specific biological intervention, that testosterone bath, to build a male.
Exactly. But today, we're kind of done with the chemistry. We're moving on to the construction site.
Yeah, the result.
We're looking at the permanent hardware that those hormones built. And I think we should be really clear right off the bat about what we are not talking about today.
Good idea.
We aren't talking about software or socialization or, how your parents raised you or what toys you played with.
No, none of that.
Yeah.
We are talking about biological architecture. I mean, if you were to open up the skull, which please, legal disclaimer, do not try at home.
Please don't.
The physical landscape of the brain itself actually looks different depending on that initial hormonal wash. It's a difference of, well, topography.
So that's the mission today, to map that landscape. We're exploring this idea of brain lateralization. And looking at the research you've pulled, this seems to be the key to understanding, well, maybe almost everything about how men and women misunderstand each other.
It really is. I mean, it explains why men so often struggle to put feelings into words, in the heat of the moment.
Right.
It explains why women statistically recover faster from strokes. And it even gives us a biological basis for what we've kind of lazily called female intuition.
Which, spoiler alert for a bit later, is not magic.
Not at all. It's engineering.
It's wiring.
It's wiring, pure and simple.
Okay, so let's get into the map. To really get the difference, we have to start with the baseline, right? We all have the same basic parts. It's not like men have an extra lobe for sports trivia or something.
Not quite, no. The human brain is divided into two hemispheres, a left and a right, and they're joined by this big bundle of nerves.
Okay.
Now, this is a bit of a simplification, but for our purposes, think of it like this. The left hemisphere is your inner accountant.
The bean counter. I like
Exactly.
that.
It handles verbal skills, logic, details, practical sequences. It likes things to be concrete, linear, predictable. It's where your vocabulary lives.
And the right hemisphere? What's that one?
That's the artist. The right hemisphere is the domain of the visual, the spatial, the emotional, the abstract. It sees the big picture.
Ah.
It recognizes patterns.
Yeah.
It doesn't really care about time or sequence. It cares about the whole image. And just a quick reminder from high school biology.
The wiring is crossed.
The wiring is crossed. Right brain controls the left side of your body. Left brain controls the right. That's contralateral control.
Okay, so that's the standard model. Everyone has an accountant and an artist. So where does the sex difference actually come in?
So the difference isn't about what sections exist. It's all about how they're organized. The core thesis from our sources is this. The male brain is highly specialized, compartmentalized.
Okay.
The female brain, on the other hand, is integrated or diffuse.
Specialized versus integrated. Let's break that down. When you say the male brain is specialized, are we talking about like a tidy filing cabinet?
That's a great analogy. Yeah. Imagine a chest of drawers. In the male brain, specific functions are located in very specific, really distinct places.
For instance.
For example, verbal abilities in men are almost exclusively found in the left hemisphere. And spatial or visual abilities like, rotating a shape in your mind or aiming a ball are almost exclusively in the right. There's very little overlap.
So the files are strictly sorted, language files in the left drawer, map reading files in the right, and they don't mix.
Precisely. It's very efficient. It keeps things separated. But, and this is a huge insight from all the medical literature, it makes the male brain surprisingly fragile.
Fragile. That's not what I'd expect. I mean, usually you associate specialization with expertise, not fragility.
Well, think about it in terms of redundancy or lack of redundancy. If you have all your eggs in one basket and you drop that basket.
Ah, okay. I see.
We see this so clearly in studies of brain damage and strokes. The sources highlight the research of a psychologist, Herbert Lansell, among others. They looked at what happens when men and women suffer similar injuries to specific parts of the brain.
So let's play this out. A man takes a hit or has a stroke on the left side of the brain. What happens?
If a man suffers damage to the left side of his brain, his language abilities are often, they're just wiped out. He might lose speech entirely.
Wow.
It's catastrophic for his verbal skills. But, and here's the kicker, his spatial skills, like reading a map or designing a building, they remain perfectly intact.
Because those are safe on the other side.
Exactly. They're safely stored in the right hemisphere, which wasn't touched, is compartmentalized damage.
And the reverse is true, I assume.
Yep. If he gets hit on the right side, he loses the spatial skills. He might get lost in his own house, but he can still talk perfectly.
Yeah.
It's a kind of all or nothing scenario.
Because there's no backup copy.
No backup. If that specific drawer gets smashed, you lose what's inside forever.
Yeah, that's a terrifyingly binary situation. It's like losing one specific hard drive in a server rack.
It is. But this specialization, it also has this massive impact on daily behavior, not just in cases of trauma. Because the male brain is so compartmentalized, it allows for, and you could argue it enforces, a kind of single-minded focus.
The shutdown mechanism.
Exactly, the shutdown mechanism.
I think every woman listening just perked up at that phrase. Explain that.
So when a man is engaged in a task that requires the right brain, let's say a complex physical challenge, fixing a car engine, or even just watching a football game where he's tracking all that spatial movement,
right,
the neuroactivity in the left brain, the verbal part, can be virtually shut off.
So the accountant literally leaves the building.
He's on his lunch break. He isn't distracted by verbal input because that verbal center is essentially offline.
So this explains that classic scenario. A man is watching a game, or he's under the sink fixing a pipe. His partner talks to him. He doesn't answer. She thinks he's ignoring her or being rude. But you're saying physically he might literally not be processing the language.
Biologically, yes. He is effectively deaf to the words. The verbal processor is powered down to divert all the energy to the spatial task. He is specializing in that moment.
It's not an attitude problem. It's a hardware setting.
It's a hardware setting.
That is wild. Okay, so that's the specialist, the male brain. Now let's look at the generalist, the female brain. You said it was diffuse.
Right. In the female brain, the organization is much more spread out. Verbal skills aren't just parked in the left hemisphere. You find them in both the left and the right. And spatial skills aren't just in the right, they're also distributed across both sides.
So back to the filing cabinet analogy.
Yeah.
The files aren't in just one drawer, they're kind of scattered across the whole desk.
Or, to stick with the cabinet, you have duplicate copies of the important files in both the left and the right drawers. And this brings us right back to that resilience factor.
The stroke studies.
Yeah, revisit those stroke studies. When women suffer the same left hemisphere damage that leaves men speechless,
They can still talk.
often, yes. They often recover much of their language ability, or in some cases, never lose it entirely.
Because they have a backup system.
They have a backup system.
Yeah.
If the primary language center in the left gets damaged, the backup neural networks over on the right side can take over. The functions are duplicated.
That just sounds objectively better. I mean, having a backup generator seems like a much smarter design for an organism.
From a survival and recovery standpoint,
Right.
Absolutely, it's more robust. But, everything in biology is a trade-off. There is no free lunch in evolution.
Right.
So if the male advantage is that intense focus, the ability to shut things out and specialize, the female disadvantage is, it's the inability to shut things out.
Because everything is always connected.
Everything is connected. Because the wiring is so diffuse and integrated, it's much harder for the female brain to completely block out distracting information. The background noise is always part of the picture.
So let's go back to that living room scenario. If a man can be in a room with a dripping tap and after a while just not hear it because he's focused on his book.
A woman is likely going to hear the tap and the conversation in the next room and the hum of the fridge and read the book all at the same time. Her brain is sampling all of it.
She can't turn off the ears.
Not in the same way, no. Which, explains why so many women describe feeling mentally cluttered or just overwhelmed by sensory input.
Incredibly so. Okay, but this connectivity isn't just about where things are stored. It's about how the two sides actually talk to each other.
Yes, and this is where we get to the most physical, measurable difference in the brain's anatomy. This is really the aha moment of the research.
We're talking about the bridge.
The Corpus Callosum.
It sounds like a spell from Harry Potter. What is it actually?
It does, doesn't it? But it's basically this thick bundle of nerve fibers that connects the left and right hemispheres. It's the data cable.
The thing that lets the logical side talk to the emotional side?
The internet connection between the accountant and the artist, yeah.
And the sources say this cable is physically different in women.
Significantly different. The research shows that the back part of the corpus callosum, it's called the splenium, is often larger and more bulbous in women than in men.
Wow.
I mean, in some blind tests, scientists could identify a brain as female just by looking at the size of this connection.
Okay, let's use an analogy here. If the male brain has, say, a standard internet connection between the two sides, maybe a decent 4G connection?
The female brain has high-speed fiber optics, a superhighway. That's the implication.
So there's a huge amount of traffic.
A massive amount of traffic. Constant information exchange happening between the two sides of a female brain. The male brain has fewer connections, so the two sides tend to operate more independently.
And this isn't just trivia. This is where it gets really interesting for anyone, trying to understand their partner or their coworkers. This structural difference, this thick bridge, directly impacts how we behave.
Oh, absolutely. It creates completely different operating systems. Let's look at emotional articulation. This is probably the #1 source of friction in relationships.
The classic dynamic, why won't he tell me how he feels, versus why does she need to talk about it right now?
Exactly that. But just look at the anatomy. Emotion is largely generated in the right brain, the visceral feeling side. Speech, as we said, is generated in the left brain.
Okay. Yeah, I see where this is going.
For a woman, explaining a feeling is neurologically easy. She's got emotional centers on both sides, verbal centers on both sides, and a superhighway connected them. The data just flows instantly.
She can feel an emotion and talk about it at the same time?
Simultaneously. She's basically built to narrate her internal state. The verbalization of emotion is almost automatic. But for a man,
that's a different story.
A completely different story. Emotion is stuck in the right hemisphere. Speech is stuck in the left. And remember, his bridge is narrower.
The 4G connection.
Exactly. For him to discuss his feelings, that data has to travel across a thinner, less efficient bridge. It is physically harder for him to access his verbal tools while he's in a highly emotional state.
So when a man goes silent during an argument, or says, I don't know, or I just can't talk about this, it's not necessarily stonewalling.
It feels like stonewalling to her, of course. But to him, it's a traffic jam on the bridge. It's a disconnect. The neural pathway just isn't built for that much traffic. He often needs to wait for the emotion to subside.
For the right brain to quiet down.
Right, before the left brain can come back online and actually find the words.
That's huge. Just knowing that removes so much judgment. It's not that he won't, it's that he can't. At least, not right in that second.
Right. And if you push him to speak while he's flooded with emotion, he might lash out or say something incredibly logical but totally devoid of feeling.
Because he's forced to jump entirely to the left brain just to speak.
He literally has to disconnect from the feeling to find the vocabulary.
Whereas for the woman, the feeling and the vocabulary are completely intertwined.
Inseparable.
Okay, but it works the other way too. This connectivity explains something we touched on earlier, intuition.
Which is so often dismissed by men as something mystical or,
Witchcraft.
Witchcraft, yeah.
Yeah.
You're just making that up or you're reading too much into it.
Right.
But the sources argue it's just superior processing power. I mean, think about what intuition actually is. It's the ability to integrate all these different data types at the same time without even consciously trying.
Okay, give me an example of how that plays out.
All right, imagine a social interaction. You walk into a meeting. A woman is listening to what you say. That's left brain, verbal data. But she is simultaneously processing your tone of voice, your facial microexpressions, the posture of the person next to you, and the whole emotional vibe of the room.
And that's all right brain data.
All right, brain data. And because of that superhighway...
She cross-references all of it instantly.
Instantly. The auditory, the visual, the emotional. She sums up the whole situation in a millisecond. She gets that feeling of he's lying, or something's wrong here, or he's about to fire someone, even if the actual words being spoken are everything is totally fine.
And to a man in that same room.
To a man who is likely compartmentalizing, he's listening to the literal words with his left brain. It just seems like she pulled that conclusion out of thin air. He'll ask, why do you think that? And she says, I just know. Because she can't necessarily isolate which specific data point gave it away. It was an aggregate. It was the sum of everything.
It's not magic, it's bandwidth.
It's bandwidth. She ran a cross-reference on 4 different data streams while he was just analyzing the transcript.
This implies that the female brain is sort of constantly multitasking.
It is. And this touches on that whole multitasking phenomenon, the idea that women can multitask and men can't. It's less of a cliche and more of a wiring diagram. The diffuse brain allows for doing 2 things at once, like talking on the phone while you're cooking dinner.
Whereas the compartmentalized male brain generally prefers doing one thing at a time.
Correct. If the male brain is focused on a spatial task, the language center is idled. If he's talking, the spatial center is idled. So asking him to do both at once often leads to frustration or a big drop in performance in one of the tasks.
I remember reading a bit in the source material about math strategies that was fascinating. It said, even when men and women get the same answer to a math problem, they might be using different parts of their brain to get there.
Oh yeah, this is a fascinating nuance. When dealing with abstract math or geometry, men tend to rely very heavily on the right hemisphere, the spatial visualizer.
They see the problem.
They see it, they rotate the shapes in their head, they visualize the trajectory.
And women.
Women, interestingly, often recruit the left brain, the verbal side. They try to talk through the logic of the problem. They'll define the variables and talk through the sequence.
Is one approach better than the other?
Well, for specifically spatial or, abstract geometric problems, the right brain visual approach is often faster. It's a shortcut. The verbal strategy can be a bit like taking the long way around. But for algebra or problems that need sequential logic, the verbal strategy might hold up just fine, just different tools.
Different tools for different jobs. And I think that's the big theme we need to land on here, because it's so easy to listen to all this and think, well, the female brain sounds better because it's so connected, or the male brain sounds better because it's so focused.
But the source material is very clear about this. Neither is better. They are optimized for different evolutionary pressures. The male brain is built for that specialized focus, for spatial dominance, for separating emotion from action.
Which makes sense. You think about the hunter tracking prey. You need silence, focus, spatial awareness. You can't be weeping over the animal while you're trying to throw a spear. You have to compartmentalize.
Exactly. The emotion would be a distraction. The female brain, on the other hand, is built for communication, for resilience, for social integration, for seeing the whole picture.
That has huge evolutionary advantages, too.
Of course. For keeping a group together, for raising offspring, for detecting danger early. If you're watching a child picking berries and listening for predators all at once, you need that diffuse wiring.
The problem comes when we expect the other person to be wired just like us.
That's it. We judge men for not being communicative enough, or we judge women for being too sensitive to the environment. But when you understand the hardware, you start to realize a man isn't refusing to share his feelings just to be difficult.
His neural bridge is literally narrower.
It's just narrower. And a woman isn't overanalyzing when she picks up on a tone of voice. Her brain is designed to connect every single piece of data it receives.
It really reframes the whole battle of the sexes as just a misunderstanding of the specs. We're trying to run the same software on two different operating systems.
That's a great way to put it. And if we stop fighting the hardware, we might actually start to appreciate what the other system can do. You want the specialist for some problems, and you want the generalist for others.
Now, before we wrap up, I want to leave you, our listener, with a thought. We've established that our brains are physically wired to perceive reality differently. The male brain filters and focuses, the female brain absorbs and connects.
Which really raises this provocative question. If our hardware is processing the world so differently, are men and women essentially living in two slightly different realities?
Do we literally see a different world?
Are we even watching the same movie?
It's a bit matrixy, but it's something to mull over. But we're not done yet. We have the hardware, we have the wiring. Next time, we're going to see what happens when you turn the machine on and put it out in the real world.
We're going to look at childhood. We'll see how these brain differences show up in the nursery, in the classroom, often long before society really gets a chance to interfere.
From the crib to the playground, you won't want to miss it. Thanks for listening to The Deep Dive.
See you next time.